Hi friends, welcome back to Hebraic Creations. Last time we talked about the two witnesses in Sodom and the brimstone judgment and how it may parallel the two witnesses in Jerusalem noted in the book of Revelation near the passages that describe those fiery rocks coming out of the sky. So while we're preparing my notes for that message, I heard a radio interview of Mike McCoy. He wrote the factually accurate novel entitled Asteroids, Bridges to Nowhere. I haven't read the book, but I thought his interview was worth recapping. Mike McCoy states that our nation has minimal resources dedicated to studying and monitoring the very real asteroid threat. At least there's a near-Earth asteroid tracking program at NASA, and it's also known as the Near-Earth Object Tracking Program. That has detected 90% of the comets and asteroids that have posed a danger to us. That's great, but almost 50% were seen after they went by our planet, which isn't much help. The NEAT has recorded over 932,000 asteroids and comets since 1995. I guess there was about 5,000 in 2019 and about 440 so far this year. There's a place called the Minor Planet Center, MPC, founded in 1947, which is a meteor tracking and reporting organization that you can follow online. It's interesting that sightings have mostly come from amateurs. And in July 25th, 2019, there was an asteroid called 2019 OK. It was spotted just one day before it passed the Earth. It flew within 40,000 miles between the moon and the Earth, which is pretty close when you consider our satellites are only about 20,000 miles away. This asteroid was pretty big. It was like 426 feet in diameter, which could wipe out an entire city. Even with that close call, the United States government allocated only meager funds to launch a NeoCam telescope, but not until 2025, in anticipation of the asteroid Apophis, which is expected to pass by the Earth in 2029. It's supposed to come within 19,000 miles, which is closer than even our satellites. Apophis is the Greek name of Apep, an enemy of the ancient Egyptian sun god Ra. But other sources add that name also means the great serpent, and it's associated with thunder, darkness, storms, and death. How nice, right? McCoy claims that we only have one space telescope right now looking for asteroids, and it's only a repurposed piece of equipment not designed for this, and even that will be decommissioned in 2020. So Mike McCoy also talked about simulation programs at NASA, and I think he mentioned Purdue University. His simulations have produced literal earth-shaking scenarios. If this all sounds far-fetched to people, he points out that there is a 1 mile wide crater in Arizona believed to be from an asteroid. Also, in February 2017, a meteor hit Russia. You may have heard about it. It injured 1,200 people when it exploded with a 470 megaton airburst that shattered windows all over the area. And in May that same year, NASA and partners held a planetary defense conference to investigate hypothetical impacts using simulation programs. In October of 2019, Space.com reported that 7 fireballs fell from the sky, landing in Chile, causing wildfires that were quickly put out, thank goodness. And scientists said they were not meteors. So what were they? As a side note, I noticed that Jupiter, the king planet, has a tendency to pull some of these rocks away from the Earth. So let's drill down a little bit more on the brimstone judgment I mentioned last time for all my archaeological and astronomy loving friends. This stuff is really fascinating, I know. There's a 2-part YouTube video by Michael Rood entitled Sodom and Gomorrah. In these 15-minute films, Rood shows the ruins of these ancient cities of the plain. As I said in the last video, they're located in the Israeli desert from Masada to the south end of the Dead Sea. I've seen them myself about a dozen times over the years, but I had no idea what they were. Josephus reports seeing these ruins in the 1st century, where they were way more obvious than what they are now, some 3,000 to 4,000 years later. Now they just look like strange rock formations. However, there are 90-degree angles and some archways, doors, and windows still visible today that point to these being man-made structures baked at high temperatures and compressed into heavy layers of gypsum ash. The ash crumbles to the touch and has eroded into these steep, powdery slopes all around, falling away from the 3-story buildings, ziggurats, and temples. There's also significant similarities in the city's layout when compared to other pagan cities elsewhere in the world that haven't been reduced to ash. Most fascinating to me are those millions of varying sizes of brimstone chunks. Samples have been lab tested in the United States and found to be unlike the yellow sulphur that is mined from the ground. Brimstone sulphur is actually white, and when it's ignited, it produces a lethal gas in this purple-blue flame that will actually melt stainless steel. So most tour guides naturally don't take people to these dangerous places because 5 people actually died after falling into this shifting ash. Ron Wyatt apparently is the amateur archaeologist that first recognized these ruins. You can look him up online. So beware, though, of the criticisms by mainstream archaeologists with an agenda to discredit the truth of the scriptures and defend evolution theories. So keep that in mind. Everyone who knew Ron thought that he was a very humble and truthful guy who had an intimate relationship with the Father. He was led by the Spirit all over the world to these overlooked and unnoticed, basically, archaeological sites. Why? I think it's because he just loved people and wanted them to know that the Bible was true so they could believe and go to heaven someday. I love how Yehovah uses the most unlikely people to do amazing things. It reminds me of the scripture in 1 Corinthians 1:27. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. I sense Ron was chosen to make these discoveries because he was not seeking fame or fortune. He just wanted to know the truth. There's another YouTube video by A Rood Awakening called The Location of Sodom and Gomorrah, Ron Wyatt's Discoveries. It gives a really good recap of Ron's discoveries and their prophetic meaning. Sodom and Gomorrah Discovered is also a pretty interesting video if you can find that one. And you can learn more about Ron Wyatt at WyattMuseum.com. His last name is W-Y-A-T-T. WyattMuseum.com. It's been noted that Ron's archaeological discoveries all point to the law and judgments, which is really interesting in light of all these messages I've been sharing. Here are Ron's major discoveries. First of all, he found Noah's Ark. That represents the judgment on the whole world. He also found Sodom and Gomorrah, which represents judgment on man's perversion. And he found the Red Sea crossing, which is a judgment on Pharaoh's army. Mount Sinai was discovered by Ron. That's where the law was given. And finally, he discovered where the Ark of the Covenant was hidden. That represents the law preserved. Ron Wyatt made his supernatural discoveries within a 12-month period between 1978 and 79, although the Ark of the Covenant took many years to dig to get to it. You can find all this information online, and I encourage you to look into it. It's really, really worth the time. And I want to wrap up this session with a warning that as you do your online research, you'll come across people who believe the Hebrew roots movement is a cult. One that had become occultic to study the scriptures from Hebrew sources. When I read articles from a few of these critics, I noticed their teachings were Greek-based, and it's quite possible their opinion comes from Hellenistic indoctrination and fear, but I'll let you decide for yourself. That's why it's so important for you to test everything I'm saying and pray for 2020 vision in 2020. You know, nobody wants to talk about judgment, and we all want to focus on Yehovah as a loving Father. But as I said before, he's also holy and just. The ancient brimstone-covered ruins are there to remind us about that. And it's good to remember Proverbs 14:12. There is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. Next time we'll look at what it means to observe the Sabbath. So stay tuned. Shalom.